Hello everyone. So like in the last tutorial, we were discussing the attempts at the classification of elements, and two attempts we have already discussed. The first one is the Lavoisier classification and second one is the Daubernier's triad. Now in today's tutorial we are going to discuss the third classification, and which is very important, which is the Newland's law of octaves. So in today's tutorial we are going to discuss the third classification, that is the Newland's law of octaves. John Newland, who has given us a very important classification, and his attempt is called as the Newland's law of octaves. Now you all might be wondering that in the last tutorial we have discussed Daubernier's triad. So the meaning of the word triad is clear, that whenever there is a group of three elements, so that group of three elements is called as a triad. But then why his classification is called as the Newland's law of octaves? So now today we are going to understand that what is the meaning of this term called octaves. So let us all start. This is the table that was given by John Newland, and we all can see that here in the table, like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 and then 8. Okay, and so this is what is octave. Octave, this word is taken like in context or in reference to music. Like when we talk about music, तो हम सबको पता है कि म्यूजिक में 7 सुर होते हैं. ठीक है, जैसे सा, रे, गा, मा, पा, धा, नी. तो ये बेटा 7 सुर हो गए. और जैसे ही हम 8वां सुर लगाएंगे, दैट इज 8th. ओके, तो वो जो 8वां सुर है वो पहले सुर की तरह होता है. इज दैट क्लियर? जैसे हम दोबारा से बोलेंगे और काउंट भी करेंगे फिंगर्स पर. सा, रे, गा, मा, पा, धा, नी, सा. तो क्या हमें समझ में आ रहा है कि जो हमारा 8वां सुर है वो पहले सुर की तरह है. ठीक है, तो उसी तरीके से जो हमारा 8th एलिमेंट होगा वो किसकी तरह होगा? वो फर्स्ट एलिमेंट की तरह होगा. तो अगर आपको ये समझ में आ गया कि ऑक्टेव का मीनिंग क्या है, ऑक्टेव इज इन रेफरेंस टू म्यूजिक. लाइक इन म्यूजिक every 8th note is similar to the first one, so likewise every 8th element will have its properties similar to that of the first element. Okay, so he tried to arrange the elements in order of increasing atomic masses. Okay, so we all need to understand that how he arranged these elements. So these elements were arranged in order of increasing atomic masses. Like he started from hydrogen, and then we need to understand that when Newland gave his periodic table, at that time 56 elements were known. The first element was hydrogen and the last element to be known was thorium. Okay, so till thorium he made his table, and every 8th element was similar to the first element in its properties. Okay, but now there is a problem. Now where is the problem? See, we all can see that they tried to arrange the elements, and all the elements were arranged in order of increasing atomic masses. But where was his table, or where was his arrangement lacking? So what are the drawbacks or limitations of his table? See, the first limitation of Newland's law of octave is that this particular arrangement was only applicable till calcium. Okay, that is till atomic number 20. It was only applicable till calcium. Right now, till calcium, that is 1 to 20 elements, they are called as the light elements. Okay, so we can also say that this classification was applicable only for the light elements. And after calcium, every 8th element, like we all can see from chromium till zirconium over here, right? So after calcium, every 8th element was not similar to the first one. Okay, so this is the first drawback, that only how many elements followed this classification? Only 20 elements followed this classification, and only the light elements, right, from hydrogen till calcium, the 8th element was similar to the first one. After that, the 8th element was not similar to that of the first first one. Okay. Second limitation of his classification is that at that time 56 elements were discovered. Okay. And John Newland was of the opinion that no elements would be discovered in the future. So he said that only 56 elements they exist in nature, and no element would be discovered in the future. But very soon the elements were discovered, and the number of elements, it kept on increasing. So it means that this concept of saying that only 56 elements they exist is also wrong. So this is a major drawback on his part, by saying that only 56 elements they exist in nature, right? Then moving on to the third limitation or drawback of his classification, as we all can see that one place is only for one element, and this place given to an element is called as a slot, right? So one slot is for one element, but we can see that there are certain slots where two elements are kept together. Okay, so this is also a limitation, right? That one slot is for one element, but somewhere we can see that in one slot he has also placed two elements, like we can see cerium and lanthanum, and we can see cobalt and nickel. So this is also a limitation, that we cannot keep two elements in a single slot, right? Slot means position for that element. Three limitations we have discussed. Now let us quickly start with the fourth limitation. The fourth limitation is that, let us look on to the column first. Okay, this vertical column, it is also called as group. So let us look on to this group, and what do we see? That fluorine, chlorine, even hydrogen and bromine. Okay, hydrogen, fluorine, chlorine and bromine, they all are non-metals, right? And with the non-metals, cobalt and nickel have been placed, but cobalt and nickel, they are not non-metals, they are metals. So this is again a limitation, that he placed metals along with non-metals, and moreover cobalt and nickel, their properties are very much different from fluorine, chlorine and bromine, right? So this is one more limitation, that cobalt and nickel, they were placed in a column of fluorine, chlorine and bromine, and their properties were totally different from each other. Okay, so this is again a limitation. And moving on to the fifth and the last limitation, if we can see that there is one element called iron, and two elements cobalt and nickel, right? And iron, cobalt and nickel, we call them as like the elements whose properties are very similar to each other. Now since their properties are so similar to each other, they should be placed in the same column. Okay, they should be placed in the same column, but Newland has placed them in separate columns. Their properties are so similar to each other that Newland placed them in separate columns, but they would have been placed in the same column. So these are the drawbacks of his table. Otherwise, like, it was the first time we can say that a tabular form of classification was done. So this is an achievement for it, that a tabular form of classification was done for the elements. Now one more achievement is there for Newland, that this particular Newland's law of classification, or this Newland's classification of elements, can we see these three elements, lithium, sodium and potassium? Now it also obeys the Dauberniers triad, right? So there is a relation between the Newland's law of octave and the Daubernier triad. So can we say that is Newland's classification also following the Daubernier triad? So the answer to this is yes. Yes, it is following, because we can see a triad of lithium, sodium and potassium, which was given by Daubernier also. So there are achievements also, but because of limitations, there is some problem also in the Newland's octaves. I hope you have understood. Let us quickly recall what we have done in today's tutorial, that John Newland, when he gave his classification, total 56 elements were discovered at that time, and the elements were arranged from hydrogen till thorium. And how the elements were arranged? All the elements were arranged in order of increasing atomic masses, such that every every eighth element was having its properties similar to that of the first one, right? So octave means that it is in context to music. Here we are talking about music, right? So every eighth element is similar to that of the first one. But what were the limitations or drawbacks? So the very first limitation is that this particular classification was applicable only till calcium, that is from atomic number 1 to 20, only for the light elements. After that, the eighth element was not similar to the first one. Okay. Second drawback is that at that time when Newland gave his classification, only 56 elements were discovered, and he said that no element would be discovered in the future. So he was also wrong here, because the elements were discovered and the number of the elements, it kept on increasing. And third limitation is that one slot is only for one element, but we can see in his arrangement that somewhere in one slot he has placed two elements also, like cobalt, nickel, and cerium and lanthanum. So this is again a limitation. Fourth limitation is that cobalt and nickel, these two elements, they have been placed in the same column with fluorine, chlorine, and bromine, and the properties are different. In the same column we cannot place those elements whose properties are different. Fluorine, chlorine, and bromine, they are non-metals. Cobalt and nickel, they are metals. So this is again a limitation. And fifth limitation, the last limitation, is that iron, cobalt, and nickel, they are so similar in their properties that they should have been placed in the same column, but Newland placed them in different columns. So this is again a limitation. I hope that you all have understood and study well, and hope you will be studying very nicely for your board exams. Thank you everyone.